The sound of breaking glass echoed through the gallery as my mother swept her arm across the display table, sending my framed photographs crashing to the floor. The handful of remaining guests quickly scattered, leaving only the sound of my mother's heavy breathing and my father's stern glare. "You ungrateful brat," Mom hissed, her perfectly manicured hands trembling with rage. "All we're asking is for you to do the right thing. Your brother needs that lake house more than you do." I'm Alexandra, and this was supposed to be my moment of triumph, my first photography exhibition featuring shots of my grandfather's beloved lake house through the seasons. Instead, it had turned into yet another family drama about my brother James and his endless entitlement. "The lake house isn't yours to demand," I said quietly, watching as my father's face turned an alarming shade of red. "Your brother has a family," Dad shouted, stepping over the shattered glass to get in my face. "He has 3 kids who need space to grow up. What do you need it for? To take more of your ridiculous pictures." Those ridiculous pictures had just sold for thousands of dollars each, not that they bothered to notice. They never did. James was their golden child, the successful businessman with the perfect family. I was just the artistic disappointment who refused to conform to their expectations. "Sign the papers," Mom demanded, pulling a folder from her designer bag. "We've already had the transfer documents drawn up. Just sign them, and we can all move past this embarrassment." I thought about the other folder in my messenger bag, the one containing the environmental assessment I commissioned 3 months ago, the one that would change everything. "No," I said firmly, meeting their shocked expressions with calm resolve. "The lake house stays with me. It's what grandfather wanted." Mom's hand shot out, knocking over another display stand. More breaking glass, more destroyed memories. Each photograph had taken days to capture, waiting for perfect light, perfect weather, perfect moments. A year of work destroyed in minutes. "Your grandfather didn't know what James would become," Dad growled. "He has a real estate empire now. He could develop that property, make it worth something, instead of letting it sit there empty." Empty? They thought the lake house was empty because they never bothered to visit, never saw the wildlife sanctuary I built on the North Shore or the artist retreat programs I ran during the summer months. They never noticed that their successful son's real estate empire was built on quick profits and cut corners. "James hasn't even visited the lake house since grandfather died," I pointed out, carefully stepping around the broken glass to salvage what photos I could. "He didn't care about it until he realized he could turn it into condos." "Development is progress," Mom snapped. "It's better than your artistic nonsense. When are you going to grow up and do something meaningful with your life?" I almost laughed at the irony. They had no idea about the endangered species nesting on the property or the protected wetlands that made development impossible. No clue about the state environmental protection order that was being finalized tomorrow. "I am doing something meaningful," I said, picking up a partially damaged photo of a family of loons on the lake at sunrise. "Just not the kind of meaning you understand." "Enough." Dad slammed his hand on the wall, making the remaining photos shake. "Either you sign these papers tonight, or you're no longer part of this family. No more support, no more connections, nothing." I looked at them both, these people who had spent years trying to mold me into their version of success, who had supported James's every venture while dismissing my achievements as hobbies, who were now destroying my work because they couldn't control me. "That's your choice," I said calmly, picking up my messenger bag. But my answer is still no. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a meeting with the State Environmental Protection Board tomorrow morning. I should get some rest." Their faces shifted from anger to confusion. "Environmental Protection Board?" Mom's voice held a note of uncertainty for the first time. "What are you talking about?" I headed for the door, stepping carefully around the destruction they caused. "You'll find out soon enough. Don't forget to tell James about the meeting. He should probably be there too." As I walked out into the cool evening air, I heard Mom's shrill voice, "Alexandra, get back here right now." But I kept walking. They'd spent years underestimating me, treating my passion as a phase, my dedication as a whim. Tomorrow, they'd learn exactly what I'd been doing with that empty lake house. Tomorrow, they'd understand why grandfather had trusted me with his legacy. And I had the photographs to prove every single moment of it. The Environmental Protection Board meeting room was already half full when I arrived the next morning. I spotted James in his expensive suit, huddled with his development team, their heads bent over property maps that would soon be worthless. My parents sat nearby, shooting me glares that could freeze hell. I took my seat quietly, placing my restored laptop and the folder of evidence on the table. Last night, after leaving the gallery, I'd spent hours recovering the photos from my backup drives, not for the exhibition, but for this moment. "This is ridiculous," James muttered, loud enough for me to hear. "Some birds and plants can't stop progress. I have investors waiting." The board members filed in, led by Director Sarah Matthews, a stern woman I'd been working with for months. She'd been particularly interested in my documentation of the wetland ecosystem. "Good morning," Director Matthews began. "We're here to discuss the environmental assessment of the Lake Pine property and its implications for future development." I watched my brother's confident smirk fade as I stood up and connected my laptop to the projector. The first image filled the screen, a pair of endangered sandhill cranes nesting in the protected marshland. "As you can see," I began, my voice steady, "the property contains critical habitat for several protected species. I spent the past year documenting their presence and behavior patterns." More photos appeared, rare orchids blooming in the wetlands, threatened fish species in the crystal clear waters, even a family of otters that had made their home along the shoreline. Each image was dated, GPS tagged, and accompanied by detailed observation notes. "This is absurd," my father interrupted, standing up. "Those could be taken anywhere. Alexandra has always been good at manufacturing fantasies." Director Matthews raised an eyebrow. "Actually, Mr. Harrison, our own environmental scientists have verified every single one of these findings. Your daughter has provided exemplary documentation of a thriving ecosystem." I continued my presentation, revealing how the property served as a crucial wildlife corridor connecting two existing nature preserves. The development plans James had submitted would devastate this delicate balance. Furthermore, I added, pulling out my grandfather's original property documents, the land was specifically designated for conservation in my grandfather's will. I have his detailed notes about the property's ecological importance. James shot up from his chair. "That's not true. The will just left her the property. There were no conditions." I smiled slightly, sliding the documents toward Director Matthews. "Actually, there were. Grandfather knew exactly what he was protecting. That's why he left it to me, because he knew I understood its real value." My mother's face had gone pale as she realized what was happening. All their plans, all their pressure, all their attempts to force me into compliance, none of it mattered now. Based on these findings, Director Matthews announced, and in accordance with state environmental protection laws, we are designating the Lake Pine property as a protected wildlife sanctuary. No development will be permitted. The room erupted. James's development team started frantically shuffling papers. My father demanded to speak to someone in charge, and my mother just sat there, staring at me like she'd never seen me before. "You planned this," James accused, storming over to my table. "You've ruined everything. Do you know how much money I've already spent on plans?" I met his gaze calmly. "You should have visited the lake house sometime in the past 5 years, brother. You might have noticed what was really there." "This isn't over," my father threatened, joining James. "We'll appeal, get another assessment." "You can try," I replied, gathering my things, "but every environmental survey will find the same thing. The lake house isn't just property to be developed. It's a sanctuary, just like grandfather intended." Director Matthews approached us, additional papers in hand. "Miss Harrison, we'd like to discuss the possibility of establishing a permanent research station on the property. Your documentation work has been invaluable." I caught my mother's slight flinch at the professional respect in the director's voice. All those years they dismissed my photography as a hobby, and now it had protected something precious. Of course, I agreed. "I'd be happy to show you the best locations for observation posts." As I left the meeting room with Director Matthews, I heard my brother's angry voice. "This is your fault. If you hadn't spoiled her all these years." I smiled to myself. They still didn't get it. This wasn't about spite or revenge. It was about protecting something beautiful, something irreplaceable, just like my grandfather had taught me to do. The lake house would remain as it was meant to be, a haven for wildlife, a place of peace and natural beauty. And my photography? Well, it had turned out to be pretty meaningful after all. 6 months after the Environmental Protection Board meeting, I stood on the lake house deck, watching researchers document a pair of sandhill cranes teaching their chicks to feed. My camera clicked softly, capturing the moment as the morning mist rose off the water. The transformation of the property into an official wildlife sanctuary had been more successful than even I'd imagined. Universities were sending graduate students for research projects, and my photography of the sanctuary's inhabitants had gained national recognition. National Geographic had even expressed interest in featuring the preservation story. Miss Harrison, one of the young researchers, approached. "We've spotted that rare orchid species you photographed last year. It's spreading to new areas." I smiled, remembering how my parents had once called this place empty and wasted. Now it was teeming with life, purpose, and scientific significance. My phone buzzed, a text from James's wife, Kate. "The kids miss the lake. Would it be okay to visit this weekend?" Just us, not James. Our family dynamics had shifted dramatically since the board meeting. James hadn't spoken to me since his development plans fell through, but Kate had reached out, admitting she'd always loved the lake house as it was. Her children, it turned out, shared my passion for wildlife photography. Of course, I texted back. "The baby otters are starting to explore. Bring their cameras." My parents had taken longer to process their new reality. Last month, Mom had shown up unannounced, her Mercedes looking oddly out of place among the researchers' practical vehicles. "I don't understand you," she'd said, watching me photograph a rare butterfly. "You could have made millions from development deals." "Come look at this," I'd replied, showing her the butterfly through my lens. "This species only exists in a few places on Earth. How much is that worth?" She'd been quiet for a moment, really looking through the camera for the first time. "It's beautiful," she'd admitted reluctantly. "Your grandfather used to talk about things like this." "I know," I said softly. "That's why he trusted me to protect them." Now, as I reviewed my morning shots, I heard another car approaching. Dad's familiar BMW pulled up beside my cabin. He got out slowly, looking uncomfortable in casual clothes instead of his usual business suit. "Alexandra," he said, walking over, "your mother mentioned you were doing some kind of presentation today." I nodded, surprised he knew about it. "The sanctuary's first educational program for local schools. We're teaching kids about conservation and wildlife photography." He shifted awkwardly, looking around at the research equipment and camera setups. "Your brother's youngest, Tommy, he can't stop talking about the photos you taught him to take. Says he wants to be a wildlife photographer." "He has a good eye," I replied, remembering Tommy's excitement over capturing his first heron picture. "Would you like to see what we're working on?" Dad hesitated, then nodded. I led him to the research station we'd set up in what used to be the boathouse. The walls were covered with my photographs, each accompanied by scientific data and conservation information. "You did all this?" he asked, studying a sequence showing the complete life cycle of a rare frog species. "This is what I've been doing while you thought I was wasting my time," I said quietly. "This is what Grandfather saw when he looked at this place." Dad was silent for a long time, looking at each photograph. Finally, he turned to me. "I was wrong," he said, the words seeming to cost him considerable effort, "about this place, about your work. Your grandfather would be proud." The words I'd longed to hear for years landed softly, like the morning mist on the lake. "Would you like to stay for the presentation?" I offered. "The kids would love to see their grandfather here." He nodded, and for the first time in years, I saw a genuine smile cross his face. That afternoon, as I watched Dad helping Tommy adjust his camera settings to photograph a family of deer at the forest edge, I thought about how things had changed. The lake house hadn't just preserved wildlife, it had somehow begun to heal our family too. James still refused to visit, too proud to admit he'd been wrong, but his children came regularly, learning to see the world through a lens of wonder rather than profit. Mom had started a garden of native plants to attract butterflies, though she'd never admit how much she enjoyed it. And Dad was slowly learning that success could be measured in more ways than dollar signs. As the sun set over the lake, painting the sky in colors no development could improve, I took one final photograph. In it, my father and his grandchildren crouched quietly in the grass, cameras ready, watching nature unfold around them. It wasn't the future anyone had planned, but it was better than anything we could have built. The lake house had become exactly what grandfather intended, not just a sanctuary for wildlife, but a place where people could learn to see the world differently. Sometimes I realized the most valuable things in life can't be bought, sold, or developed. They can only be preserved, protected, and shared with those willing to open their eyes and really see.